All made it back to the championship ring.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode. We've got him on.
Yeah, it's taken us a few weeks, but we finally got the one, the only Gumby. Gumby, welcome in.
Good to be here. Most people that are watching this nowadays don't even know what a Gumby is. So, go get on, tell them to get on YouTube and type in Gumby, and they'll be like, "What is that?" It's called clay cremated, whatever cartoons.
Well, I'm glad you kind of brought that up. I mean, obviously your name's Jim Simko, but I probably knew you for 15 years before I knew your name was Jim. So
My parents and brothers, everybody calls me Gumby, so nobody knows me as Jim anymore.
So how did that start?
Back in 1986, which was my second year. Yes, I did say 1986.
yeah, Gumby, that's 1 year before Nate and I were born.
Yes, that was. Oh, that's very dating. That was my second year of derbying, and I had met four guys named Rocket Ron, Steve Carroll, Mel Fisher, and Brett Barrett. Now, I don't know how many of those names you recognize anymore.
I know two of the four.
I know all of them, actually.
So those were, to me, my derby idols growing up. And growing up, if I ever drive again, you'll see on my car, three of the four have now passed away from cancer. And so now I put a heart on each of the side of my cars of each of their car colors, which was Mel was pink, Brett was brown, Steve Carroll was blue, and then Rocket Ron's still alive. I will put their number in the middle of a heart with their color, and that's always going to be on my car because that's the guys got me started. Well, I met those guys the year before in Camas, Utah, at a derby up there, and I was like, wow, those are like the Michael Jordans. Those are the guys that know what's going on. And they invited. I was so excited to walk around, and they would actually talk to me because I was a nerd back. Not that I'm not a nerd now, but I was a real goofball back then. And I am. I wouldn't want to say Justin Smith, but I was a little goofy and a little off the beaten path, and so they gave me the time of day, and so I started following them around that year. And they invited me to go run in a derby at the state fair. What are you laughing at? They invited me to drive in a derby at the state fair. So I spent all this time buying a car. And what I did, I painted a Gumby doll on the car. And I got there, and everybody's like, and I was a goofy. Understand, I was a goofball. And I got to the show and started talking to him. I'm like, man, everybody's got cool nicknames like Sledgehammer and Rocket Ron and all these, Carol was Carol. And I said, I want a nickname. So they walked over to my car and saw the Gumby doll. And they said, you're Gumby. And I hated it. And they said, well, you're Gumby. And so from then on out, the next few times I ran shows, they would say, they'd go up to the announcer and say, when this kid comes in, say, here comes Gumby. And after, about a year of that, I had a bunch of kids come up afterwards. Are you Gumby? And I go, yeah. And it just hooked. And it's one of those things that where most nicknames happen is when you don't like it, that's when it happens. And that's when I started getting nicknamed Gumby. Started in 86.
That's awesome. So when I was a little kid, I remember you coming into Heber, and you actually had like a big styrofoam Gumby doll on the roof.
5.5 foot styrofoam Gumby doll back in the early 90s. Those things cost $100 to build. And I had one. And matter of fact, the one I had on my Heber car, I was finishing up the season with it somewhere, and somebody stole it. Oh. And it was gone. And then all of a sudden, because back then I'd started making a name for myself a little bit in the derby world with, the brand. It's all branding. I always say branding is the most important thing you can do. Create a style, a name that, helps people recognize you. and that brand had come around a little bit, and a bunch of people had stole it. I found out it was in a Derby driver had stole it, and they started sending me like ransom notes to get it back. And I ignored them and everything. So the Derby I went to, the very end Derby of the year, was at West Jordan, Utah, and I remember watching a show come in, and somebody was driving a derby car in the arena with a rope tied around the rear bumper, and they were dragging my Gumby doll out into the arena.
Oh my hell.
And as a joke, and I ended up getting it back. It was destroyed, but they thought it was funny. So I don't know if I built another one until I went on to a TNT motorsports show back in Kansas. We built one and put on the top of that car. And then a TV crew that was there liked it so much that I pulled it off the car afterwards and give it to them. And that was the last of the Gumby dolls. Now I just have a little metal one that goes on top. But if I drive again, you might see a big 5.5, 6-footer come back out just for the last show or something.
That'd be cool.
I mean, seriously though, when I was a little kid, like it was the paint jobs were way more important than the build of the cars when I was a little kid.
I think that's where I got
it. And so I just remember,
honestly, go ahead. You remember that?
I just remember like when you would pull in, it was like one of the coolest things is seeing like the stuffed animals or like the cartoon character themes and stuff on cars back when I was a little kid.
You had the beauty contests where they'd give you $100 or $200 if you won a beauty contest. I remember people doing elaborate stuff. Where one guy in Murray Park one day put a dog ears and a tongue sticking out the front, and then he had two big legs on the side over this quarter panels, and he pulled out in the middle of the arena. And as you would get introduced, you'd pull your car forward a little bit. Well, his car, he pulled forward. As he pulled forward, the leg of one side of the dog leg leaked, and he had a squirt gun that shot water onto the car next to it. So he's pissing on the car next to it. And
that's awesome.
And he definitely won the best looking car of that day because it was just the uniqueness of it. And so, funny. Yeah, it was big. And I think, really, you look at Utah, and really what Utah, if you ask anybody, and everybody across the country always says, what has made Utah so big? And it was getting the crowd involved in the shows.
Oh, yeah.
And they've done that through a couple things, paint jobs, getting people excited about the brands or the styles and people, and then the hitting in Utah for even the hitting back in. I actually think the hitting was more aggressive, old school. It's just more violent now because we didn't have the same cars that we had back then where we have now. But
you didn't have the horsepower back then.
Yeah, most people back then, it was all about destroying the car, having a good time. There wasn't any money involved in it, and so it was a different show. But the crowd got enticed back then, and it's just the promoters. Every promoter that's in Utah. Well, almost every promoter in Utah. I could think of a couple rough ones, but most of the shows really got the crowd involved. We got games in between the heats. And, we always said, as I became a promoter with Johnny and everything, we always said there was three parts of a derby: the crowd, the drivers, and then the promoters. And you all had to work together to make it a good event for everybody to watch. Oh, yeah. And it had to be fun. You look back east, you have some of the best drivers that I guess that are known to man in the derby world, and they go to shows and there's 1,000 people, 500 people in the crowd, but every one of the cars are painted black, and nobody's figured out that that's not a good thing. It has to be entertainment.
Yeah, we actually talked about it. I don't know how you would do it, but we tried to figure out some way that, like, if you showed up to our show with a black car or a brown car, you got penalized. I don't know how you would do that and actually make it fair and have people not be pissed. But I was like, it'd be cool if you could give everyone something stupid, but some kind of advantage or some kind of reward to paint their car.
Yeah.
Because I think the crowd likes it a lot better.
Oh, they do. That's half the fun is, you watch some of these heats back east on camera,
You
and
don't know who the hell's
80% of the
who.
cars are black. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't say
No.
it's not it detours, the video company that's filming the show. It detours from them because a lot of people don't want to watch that.
No.
Oh yeah, when I've
You
gone
know,
back there and helped
the
on the berm, and
creativity, the
I've been on the berm trying to help, and
I remember.
you lose track of who you're supposed to be timing because the cars just blend together.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Back when I first started, you had Captain Crunch, you had the Pink Panther, and then a lot of people were themed, meaning they had their own groups. You had the
Morgan's
Twilla
Auto Body.
Outlaws, so they all painted up the same. Yeah, and Morgan Auto Body.
Yeah.
What it was, the
Yellow.
orange, white, and yellow, wasn't it?
Yep.
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 Twilla
See, I still remember
Outlaws.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you had groups that all did their things the same color. I was always green. You had um, just so many varieties of people, and then there was just people that wanted to paint them up wild and crazy, and
Yeah.
and that really started it off for getting the crowd engaged.
Yeah, I
Um,
go back and I watch some of that old school video because I have a ton of it, and you rarely see a black car. Like they're
yeah,
vibrant colors, they're characters off of TV shows,
Yeah.
they're just there's something wacky for everybody.
Yeah. About the only time you'd see a black car would be like a Batman car.
Yeah.
yeah, and that is if promoters could figure a way to get that re-engaged in drivers, and not tell and teach drivers to be individuals, not a follower of a style. I mean, it's like, you want to blend in. Why don't you be your own self? You're never going to
Yeah.
get to
Yeah.
be this.
We tried to do that in Heber the last couple of years and bring back the best looking car contest, but I felt like it worked for like the wire cars, but not for the
Weld
weld
cars.
cars. The weld cars, they all still showed up with their black and their browns.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's only like a
Yeah,
handful of weld
And we
cars.
even offered
Fix
two
it plates.
fresh fix-it plates fresh on the winner, thinking that would entice people, and it really didn't. I mean, out of all the wild cards, we'd get like maybe three
Yeah.
guys that showed up with like a paint job that
Would-
was worthy of talking about.
Yeah. I still look
yeah.
back at Maynard's. Maynard's is still my favorite
It,
one that showed
Yeah.
up.
and I will tell you that the stickering of cars has come a long way to help out too. I
Yeah.
mean, the people are starting to sticker them up nice, and now they're traditionally becoming more almost like a NASCAR feel, where they've got professional looking styles and stickers, but you don't get a lot of the. It's still backing a black car. It's still backing
Yep.
you know, back in the old days, the orange. We had an Orange Crush guy. It was always orange. It was Orange Crush. Painted his car like an oil crush can. And then you had, of course, the Coors and Budweiser, and you saw a lot of those kind. And then every once in a while, you see a police car and so on and so forth. But yeah, if they would, if the drivers would become, I would say, become their own individual and try to stop being like everybody else.
Yeah.
Sometimes it
I
would really help the sport.
Well, and I think too, like you hear all these guys talk back east about wanting to push it to the next level. I think the biggest thing is you've got to get the crowd involved to push it to that next level because they're the
It's
consumer.
Well, you know, we all watched the new big. I won't name names, but the new big thing that was happening this year. Well, they had good driver turnout. They had great cars. They had indestructible cars. They were 80% black with a lot of them had, you know, it felt, I don't care who the names are. It felt the same.
yeah.
Yep.
I mean, you looked at back when NASCAR was in its prime. You had Kellogg's with all the funny Kellogg's characters painted all the way down the side of the cars. The crowd got engaged and they would buy a hat for that car because it was a cool style and it
Yep.
was different. And Derby drivers have just not figured that out.
No.
They're so far behind the eight ball, and they don't have the crowd. That show that we were referring
Yep.
to, there's nobody in the stands.
No.
You're never going to be able to sell that to
a big
big
brand.
marketing company when you
Yeah.
have nobody watching.
And that's
And
why you kind of hit it on the head a minute ago. Like Utah is a special place because you go to all these different venues and the bleachers are sold out.
Yeah.
I mean, even for some of our smallest podunk derbies in Utah, they still sell it out.
Yeah. I think every time I go to
uh,
Duchesne, that thing is packed.
Yeah. And I think that, you've got it right. You've got to get the crowd engaged. I mean, I've only been to a few derbies outside of Utah, but like when I watch them on like YouTube, it's crazy to me when you see these guys like literally sitting on like lawn chairs on the berm or on like gooseneck trailers, and you look around, you're like, where are the people?
Yeah.
And but that's the difference between a $10,000 purse and $100,000 purse.
Yeah.
oh yeah, Utah's. You know, you go to shows. I mean, we there was just a good. It was a great show last week in California.
Oh yeah. That
But
was one of the best
guess
shows I've
what?
seen in a while.
The crowd wasn't very big.
No.
No, yeah, I only watched a couple clips. I didn't watch it because I was busy, but the couple clips I watched, I was thinking the crowd was maybe at 60% capacity.
Yeah, there's still a lot of empty
Yeah.
seats.
And the crazy thing is they have huge population bases out there, and that right there is on the promoters because the promoter, great guys, doing a heck of a job getting the drivers because they have California still is a lot like Utah when it comes. They got some fun paint schemes and
Yeah.
styles. They do pretty darn good job out there, but the promoters not done. I don't know what he's done when it comes to this form of marketing to get people into the stadium.
Yeah.
And he's forgetting that 1/3 of the equation. You got to, and once that third, if you're a promoter, you're renting the facility and that facility is filling up to capacity, you're a happy promoter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once
You
he
know,
figures out that other third, then they're going to be loving life.
yeah, that life is good. You have the ability to do a whole lot more with, it's because, they're sellouts. And
Yeah.
when you have, and you go back there and it's like, what's the ticket price? And I don't know what the ticket price is, but a lot of times you go to those places and those shows, oh, we're 10 or $15. And I'm like, they're like, what are ticket prices in Utah? And I said, well, I think a $15 ticket is a cheap ticket. And I
Yeah.
think anymore, I've seen it last year. I think I seen the first time it hitting $30 and $32 a ticket.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
I think that the top tier shows are around that $30 range. If I'm not mistaken, the UTC's up in that 30 range. I think the State Fair is.
yep.
Juab still, I think, one of the cheaper tickets. I still think they're down around that $20 range, but they also have 12,000 seats to fill.
Yeah.
Um,
And our
what's
shows are
Mania?
all right up at around $30 now.
30, yeah. And I know that like Wasatch is raising their ticket prices for the first time, I think, in like 5 years this year. I think they're going to be at $30 this year as well.
What if your family and you're in Wasatch and it's one time a year thing, you plan for it and you do it as a family, and
Yep.
it's worth it. And the reality is the cost to put on a show. I was telling somebody when Johnny and I started putting on shows back in, this will be year 20. It's been in the 90s, late 90s. I think is when we started looking at it and started doing it. A show we could rent the facility, put the prize money on, and a show was costing us somewhere just south of 30 grand a year, or 30,000 a show. We could produce a show, get the insurance, get all those kind of things, and put on a good show. And that was back then. That was really good prize money. It's spending $9,000 or $10,000 a show in prize money. That was big money back then.
Yeah.
And nowadays that's changed. Nowadays it's anywhere from 75 to 100 grand is your startup cost to put on an effective show with all phases, marketing to the promoter to the spectators. It's 75 to 100 grand.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I believe that because like for Wasatch this year, they added that third day, and it's a Thursday, and it's on the 24th of July, which for people outside of Utah, that's a holiday here in Utah. But I know that they're spending probably $15,000 on some cool things that aren't nothing set in stone, so I don't want to break news yet, but some cool things literally just to make the show better for the crowd that
Yep.
evening.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean we're already going to have fireworks, but I mean it's going to be a lot. It's going to be one of those events where like you don't want to miss it just for the small parts that we're adding to it. But we're trying to make that Thursday night a little more special for the
That's
crowd.
one thing that Heber, we were involved with Heber for a few years, and they do a very, very good job of. They always have stuff in games going on, for the drunken or the drug induced. You know, I got those LSD glasses on one time. I'm like, oh, dude, this is awesome. Like, whoa, dude.
Yeah.
I didn't have the chemical in my body vibe or feel, but I was like, oh wow, that's gnarly.
Yeah. No, we're
They
we're
do a lot
super
of
excited for the things that we're working on, like just for the crowd.
Yeah.
So like I've always I mean, you guys know this better than anyone gonna be. You take care of the drivers will put on a show. So you just got to figure out how to take care of the
oh
drivers,
yeah.
and you got to figure out how to make sure that the crowd is happy, so they come back year after year.
Yep.
And I think you guys have done a really good job. I mean, May Mania is probably my favorite show that you guys do put on, and that show sells out every single year.
Yep.
And I think that show, I mean,
Yeah, it's
that one, I mean, the time of the year is exciting because everybody like wants to go to Mania, get their blood pumping, but the warm weather, it's just a good feeling to be at that show. But I've always had a good time at Mania. It's a fun atmosphere.
Yeah. It kicks the
yeah,
year
I
off.
like spring derbies because I'm not burned out yet. So yes, May Mania is a good time of the year. It's probably the only one of the year that I'll probably really look forward to. And then it sort of goes downhill. And then you're excited about Havoc because it means it's over. And so
Yeah. Um,
and and everybody laughs about Havoc. Everybody says, "What's your least favorite show of the year?" And that's State of Utah wise. Mine's Havoc. Can't stand it. I don't. I'm not a one and done fan. I
No.
I like the competition, the style. I like the chance to go out, wreck a car, fix it, get back out there. So that's my style. So I tell everybody it's my. It is a very popular show. We have people coming from I don't know how many states to that show,
There were a
and they
lot
love it.
last year.
yeah.
Oh
Yeah, Nate and I
yeah,
have
that
talked
was our
about
biggest
this.
miss.
Like the one and dones, like at certain shows, I think is very well needed.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to use like an Eagle Mountain, for example, a Manti. They work really well with the one and dones, but there's just something about where you show up, you win your heat, you go to the main event, the
Oh,
top 16 drivers or whatever for the night roll in, and there's a champion at the end of the
yeah.
night. To me, there's just something about that style that I like more than just a one and done.
Yep.
Yeah, and I don't do one. I can't. I'm not a one and done kind of guy. I mean, in my older age, if I come out and I go do an old iron wire, a one and done, that's great. But at the same point, you want to have that championship heat, that team show, or that in any form you want to do it, where there is the battles going on to get in there. There's something about that battle that means you're earning even more because of all the effort you put into it
Oh yeah.
at the show that night, the next day. There's a lot to be said about that.
Well,
So that's by far my style.
and I don't know how many times you've gone to a show. I mean, thank goodness for me, it's not been a ton, but I've been the first one out in the heat. I've gone out and
Mhm.
something stupid just puts me out right out of the gate. And then, it's always nice to go be able to hurry and fix it and get back in there. Twice I've had to go through the grudge match and come back to win a show. And to me, those are some of probably my favorite wins because I had the failures at the beginning of the night. I corrected it and then come all the way back through to get on top.
Yep.
The one time I drove Blizzard Bash, it was a year or two after Kings of Crash came out. I decided to go out to Blizzard Bash, and they had one and dones, and it was just it was pretty much their old iron wire show. I mean, it was a little bit of weld, but it was a simple build. And I got out there and I was so excited to sit there and talk to everybody. I talked to people all the way through the days before and up to the show. And right before the show, they're like, all right, got to get your cars lined up. I ran and jumped into my car. And I ran out there to the car, started driving in, and I realized that I had my weak battery in my car, but it was too late to change it. I didn't barely have it tightened down, so I tightened the nuts with my hand. I got out in the arena, and my exhaust started popping because the battery was going dead, and I was out quick because I was too busy talking out in the pits. And so, yes, I feel you. I've been there. And I was the first car out.
I think TJ had battery
Topeka
issues in Heber last year, and he had to go back through the garage. I think he ended up fourth, but that's one thing I do like about it. That later in the year when we're talking Manti, when we're talking Havoc, it is sure nice not to have to bring tools to a derby. It's sure nice to just show up. The car's hanging on by a thread. I can go junk it in one heat because I might not have enough life left in the car to go to. But I do like that too.
From a driver's
that is the argument, and people do like that.
From a driver's standpoint, I'd
Just
rather
not me.
the heats in the main.
Yeah.
As a spectator standpoint, I love the one and dones just because nobody cares. They're not trying to save anything. They're out there for putting on a show.
I definitely think there's great things about both ways.
Yeah.
I really do.
And that's true. It's just my personal preference, and some
100%.
people love one and dones, and my preference is not. But I get it, and people do not care. Oh my goodness, it's like I was like, well, he definitely wanted to finish his car off. Holy crap, you know. And so
I want to kind of turn the conversation back a little bit, kind of get away from the promoting, kind of go back to Gumby. So you started in '85, and here we are in 2025. So for people
we won't count the age.
Oh, I'm going to. So, but that's 40 years being in the sport. How long was you interested in Derby before you started driving?
I got hooked on derbies in 1972 in Bishop, California. That's my hometown, and is born in Bishop. I used to watch a cartoon called Speed Racer. It was a huge cartoon when I was young. I'd get up every morning to watch the race cars, and I just loved race cars. My grandmother took me 2 blocks over to show me a race car, which was actually a derby car that somebody was building, had it all painted up red, white, and blue, beautiful looking paint job. She took me over, and I wanted to go see it. Every day she'd take me over, I walk around it, and I was like, where's the race? And they took me to the Derby, and they said when the flag dropped in 1972, my jaw dropped, and they could not get my head off the arena. I was so involved, just in love of the sport. And from then on, and I will say from then on, it's all I ever wanted to do was be around Derby cars. We would go after the Derby every day, every year, take pictures of all the cars the next day all over town. And I have those pictures in my office still of years ago from the 70s of beautiful. I have slideshows from the 70s that I can put up on screens. And I can't wait till I'm 16. Can't wait till I'm 16 so I can drive in a Derby. And my mom said, you can't drive in a Derby till you're an Eagle Scout. So I was an Eagle Scout. I couldn't, there was so many. And growing up, my parents would say, if you're not good, it wasn't Santa's not coming to the house. If you're not good, you're not going to the Derby this year. And that's how involved I was since 3 years old, 1972.
That's awesome. So, do you remember what your very first Derby car was?
1971 Chrysler Newport.
Ooh,
Still have pictures of it. Made a wood battery box, put a battery in the floor, didn't know you needed to tie Chrysler motors in. Went all the way across the arena and jammed the trunk up, and The motor mounts broke, went forward, grabbed my cables, and took my battery right into the firewall, cracked it, and I was out.
Well,
That's the first car ever.
that's awesome.
Second car was a 70 Dodge Polara. Third car was a 66 New Yorker.
Are you
Then it
hearing
was a
that?
68 New Yorker that I took to 67 New Yorker that I took to Heber City, painted pink, blue, and purple. And my 10th car was a 74 Pontiac station wagon, which tilted my way of thinking, and I shifted gears.
I was gonna say Mopar. You were a Mopar guy for a minute.
I was Mopar lover. And I ran Mopars. It was 50-50 for probably 8 years, 9 years. Back after my mission, I had started running a few Imperials up in Morgan and Hooper and Syracuse and a few of those other, up in Fairview and all those areas. I actually ran a couple up in Camas Heber too. I ran a Chrysler wagon up in Camas one year, and I was probably 50-50. And then I just started stockpiling wagons and GMs and let the Chryslers go because I kept doing really well with the GMs and couldn't do anything with the Chrysler. So
How many cars at your peak? How many cars do you think you've owned at one time?
we Johnny and I got back once we merged. We sort of merged all of our cars together, but we kept buying, and we had a lot in Twilla and a lot in Ogden at the same time, and we hit 100 cars. 36 of them were GM Chev wagons.
Holy cow.
And we got to 100 cars, and I wish we wouldn't have thought of this because we're never going to run all these cars. We got to start selling them off. And so people were starting to offer us $1,000, $1,500. And I had Lanús from Minnesota come in, and we had a bunch of GM wagons. I think they bought 10 or 12 of them wagons for $1,500 a piece, and I thought we were rich.
I bet you had them. Wish you had them today.
No, they were, everyone that he bought right now would be worth best part 10 grand.
Oh yeah. That's
So
crazy.
yeah, we had 36 of them, but we hit 100 of them, and every one of those 100, there was not a Chrysler in the bunch, there wasn't a Ford in the bunch, and they were all basically 73 to 76 GMs of one sort or another, 100 of them.
That's
And we
crazy.
sold a bunch of them off.
So, just a guess, how many derbies do you feel like you've driven in?
Back when I was running a lot more, I'm in the 125, 130 shows, somewhere in that area between all the, one and dones. Drive down behind down in Utah County one night. Somebody said, we're having a derby. And we said, really? We loaded up the car, and back then pretty much all shows were the same. And we pull up, and on the backside of an Arctic Circle, they'd built an arena, and about 12 cars showed up, and they did a derby out in the arena where they charged everybody to come in. They were trying to do it as a fundraiser, so we did that one, and we did some at the racetracks and that. And so probably 125 to 130, somewhere in there.
That's awesome.
Out of all your years derbying, what was your favorite show or favorite arena to drive at?
Camas, Utah.
Camas?
Absolutely loved. You got to understand, back when, where I met all my close friends, Camas, Heber, Colville, Morgan. Those were huge Northern Utah shows. Then we had Logan. Logan was a lot of fun too. Had a lot of good times in that Colville. Logan was like, you're going to allow that? I mean, we wouldn't allow those cars to run anymore with the safety issues that were on those cars back then. But the 4th of July down in Hooper was huge, and so, and then we started going into Fairview and places like that. We didn't have to we didn't really travel that far. There was only one show in Salt Lake back then, and the state fair wouldn't allow them anymore. And there was a whole bunch of shows that popped up after, but Murray Park was coming around. I took over Murray Park as a promoter in 1992. and but yeah, my granddaddy to this still, of all the derbies I've ever been to and watched, I would say my ultimate favorite show has always been Camus. Old school Camus. New school Camus, a lot different. It's changed a lot over the last several years, but the old Camus, man, I used to go up and watch Todd Stewart and that initial hit. I hated it, but I still love the show.
Yeah,
I
we
love the
watched a lot
show.
of good
And
cars get junked.
Yeah, I remember in like 2004, 2005, like right as I was getting in, probably like my first year. I remember there was one heat in Camus, initial hit, long ways,
Like
one car
pulled
pulled
away.
away from the initial hit in one of the heats.
oh
Like
yeah,
done.
Yep.
And I'm talking, I mean,
Mopars.
yeah, but a lot of these cars were dropping drivelines on that initial hit. But I'm talking like some of these guys would rip the trunk off a 66 New Yorker, like in one hit, gone.
Yep.
oh,
And
oh yeah. I was always, after the first year, I got knocked out by was it who? What's his name from up in Camus?
Stewart?
Not Stewie, but
Gardner.
Gabe. Oh, what was it? He's still around. He doesn't drive anymore. I'm having a brain cramp now that I'm on screen, but he and another guy, I took a 68 Chrysler wagon up there, and I I started going. I'm like, I'm in a Chrysler wagon. Okay, I don't want to do this initial hit. I'd rather save. I always said I like to save my bullets till after the initial hit, where you could use them effectively. But both of them lined up on me, and I got hit full of track by two cars at the same time, and it hunkered that 68 wagon in one shot, and pretty well rung my bell. I mean, I was not very coherent the rest of the night. I was seeing stars, and I was half there. I got it. I made the main, but I hit a driver's door, and I was glad because they called me out, and I was like, I just wasn't all there. It was those were some hard hits.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And that track's really long and really pretty hard.
Yeah.
Considering some of the tracks through like the 90s and 2000s, that's probably one of the harder tracks too.
Yeah.
Remember the old days though. Going to Camus was the Derby, but it was also people watching, the people that were in the.
Oh yeah.
And it was like, oh, here it is, here it comes. Some guy dressed up like a flag. I was like, what? It was just. Honestly, back when I was driving, it was 30 years old at the time. They had been doing it for like 30 years almost, and so it was just. I call it the Rose Bowl of derbies back in the day. Now new derbies have popped up and taken off and become big, huge shows. But Camas, Heber, Colville, Morgan, Utah was a bloodbath. It was all.
It was like a meeting ground for everybody.
Otherwise, we would go over, and our group would sit in one corner, and we'd eye the people on the other side of this. The Biglers and the Troy Tunes and all those guys. They would park over in one area. Then you had the Stewarts. Then you had, and Galen Richens, and you had all those guys stacked up, and you'd all be like, it didn't get real till the drawing of the heats. Then it was like, oh, this one is gonna hurt.
Yeah, well, it's funny you kind of say that because like the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was really engaging in the sport, Morgan was probably the best derby drivers per like little town in Utah. Like they were stacked.
Morgan was not an easy.
No.
Yeah.
And then like I feel this is just my personal opinion, but I feel like Heber took over like that 2006 range, and for about 10 years I felt like Heber dominated. And then I kind of felt like I seen a shift going towards Delta a little bit, but now I see the shift going to Tooele. Yeah. I see there's a young core in Tooele that is just I feel like they're going to be the big city in Utah.
Yep.
Heber there. The drivers in Heber, and it had a couple people cross over from Camas, in that area that lived out in the sticks that were part of that group. But yeah, Heber got really good there for quite a few years, and they're still good. They're still a very, there's 5 or 6 of them out of Heber you don't take for granted. But yeah, back in the days, that Morgan show it was no joke. It was like the best of the best. They brought their best car there. Camas, they went just to have, they were drinking beer out in the pits and having a good old time. But
Yeah.
Morgan was all about getting even, or, that's the one show that I actually got escorted by county sheriff
Gumby escorted
horses
by sheriff.
out of Morgan, because it was funny because I took a 69 Imperial and went out and won the heat. And Galen Richens was driving it. Do you know who Galen is?
I know of him. I don't like know him.
Did they
No.
name it? Did they call him?
2 or 3 weeks before, we were in Hooper, and he hit me, and I was in an old Chrysler, and I look over at him, and he flips me off, and I'm like, oh yeah, here we go. That was the sign of let's tango and have some fun. And we got into Morgan, and I had a brand new 69 Imperial. He had a 64 New Yorker. They waved the flag, and I assaulted him with that 69 Imperial and absolutely knocked him through the fence. I mean, we junked him hard. And he walked over, and afterwards he said, "What was that about?" And I said, "Don't you remember flipping me off a couple weeks ago?" I said, "I don't forget." And comes into the main event. There was 8 cars in the main event, 7 Imperials, 1 New Yorker. And it come down to me, Todd Stewart, Troy Toon, and that one guy that was driving a New Yorker around, that everybody was after the Imperials, left him completely alone. And I had hit Todd Stewart in the door. Troy Toon come up behind me, was pushing me across the arena because we were at a pretty raised speed. Todd pulled up in front of me. I hit him in the door. I was on my brakes for 25 feet. I couldn't stop because we were getting pushed so hard. And they didn't call me out because they thought I saw me stopping. Well, all the women, not the guys, but all the women in the pit started screaming and yelling between all the groups. And there was like this almost brawl out. And I go up in the timer's booth to collect my money. And I'm standing there, and the police officers call up, "We need more officers. Gumby's in a fight down." And I'm like, Gumby's standing here collecting his money. Gumby's in no fight whatsoever. So I start walking down into the pits, and everybody's, "There he is." And the police are surrounding me, and they're like, "I think you need to leave." And I'm like, "Well, fine." So they helped me tie my car down, and they escorted me with the police horses and everything out to the freeway, and I got on the freeway and left. That was fun.
Police escort.
But I ended up getting second place because I hit Troy Toon, rolled him over, and when he came back down, we got stuck. And the Chrysler that had been stuck for 2 minutes drove around and bumped me in the back, shut his car off, and won the show, and I took second. I was like, oh. But yeah.
Back in that time frame, I mean, just growing up in Heber, the most popular driver, my favorite driver at the time, was probably Digger, Lynn Kinsey.
Digger Kinsley. Oh, yeah. Jason Street in the group.
Yeah.
He's the one who got me started.
And then as I was getting into Derby, then I started idling Lynn Mason. He's the one that helped me get my start. And I worked
44X.
Yeah.
44X.
And he taught me a lot and helped me get going. But if I had to choose someone outside of there that was probably my favorite, it was probably Todd Stewart. I loved watching Todd drive. He could drive any way. He could drive smart, methodical. He could turn it up when he needed to. And I mean, he's personally on one of my Mount Rushmores for Utah.
Yep, he's actually, we were pretty much rivals back then, but he is him and David Bro, if you know who David Bro is, he's a Mount Pleasant guy. Of course, your Bretts, your Mel, Steve's, the ones that really took me under their wings were, of course, some of and Rocket Ron were my favorites just because of association and the stature they had. When they went to an arena, people respected them and knew they were in for a rough battle. But Todd Stewart, amazing driver. Really, really liked Todd. Mount Rushmore. people have always asked me, who do you think the best drivers in Utah are? And I'm like, I have to ask the question, old school, new school.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
then I have to say, and then yeah. And then it's like, really, are you asking me who is the best? Because nowadays people judge people off who wins. There are some of the best drivers don't win because they put on a show. And
Yeah.
to me, I think a lot of those guys are the best drivers, because
Oh,
they went out there and gave the show to the fans. And so there's a lot of people that,
it's a very loaded question. It really is.
yep.
it is. And it's a hard question to answer. But if you were to say all time greatest in Utah, the names are going to pop up in my book and yours, probably Gus Adams.
Oh yeah.
Very, you didn't want to piss him off, but if he wasn't mad, you weren't too afraid of him till the end. But he could drive like Todd any way you wanted. Nowadays, your best drivers, it would be a completely different, your Clay Stewarts are great,
Yep.
but they're not known as the most aggressive drivers. So
No.
it really, you have to, who's your best driver under this category almost is what you would have to
Yeah.
say, somebody that's a showman, because really a best driver is almost needs to be who won Mad Dog.
Yeah.
Your Mont Sweats, your Ryan Sweats, that do not give one rat's butt if they win. I mean, they were showmen there for a while. Back when I was growing up, Scooter Carroll was a showman. His dad was Steve Carroll, but Scooter was a hard hitting fool.
Oh yeah.
It's evolved. And so there's a lot of great drivers, but so that was, as you said, Brad, that's a loaded question. You'd have to say, under what terms do you want me to give you the best driver?
Yeah. So, Gumby, I've got a question for you. So, what did you do in the 90s, early 2000s to piss off the Heber drivers? Because when we were kids, everybody in Heber, it was kill Gumby.
Honestly, I was hanging around with Mel, Brett, Steve Carroll, because when we would go up there with those, when I met them, they would go up there and it was a battle. And I think, anytime you do something like I did with painting my cars bright green, I wasn't trying to hide from anybody. I was always trying to be bright. I had come around to the best way of thinking to drive GMs by the time I got running Heber a lot. And I would just be there in the end with those kind of cars. And so anytime you're there in the end, you're a bright color, you're part of a group that's not from a city. That's really all it was. I never had any bad blood with, Morgan Auto Body. We'd stare at each other a little bit over there. And there's a few drivers, but back then, Heber, you had your group coming from Morgan. You had your group coming from, and so Heber was another one of those that, it was a 60 car show. You drew a heat and they'd line you all up in a heat race laying at the old arena.
Yep.
And you'd look down there and you're like, there's the heat that I'm in. And you got to stare at it the whole night before the heat started. So you knew who it was. Other drivers got to go in and lobby against you, and it was fun. It was fun. It was,
I was
Heber
just
was
wondering
fun.
because that growing up riding bikes around, I just always remember the Smiths on Main Street would always have Gumby sucks on their car.
Yeah, but I
That was,
think that goes back to a little bit of jealousy in a sense, because like when I remember when I was in like my fourth or fifth year, I remember rolling a car at the Rabbit Rumble in Delta, and I had a guy on the sideline like booing me, and I'm like, why is this guy booing me? Like, this is my first time to Delta. Like, I just rolled a car, and he's booing me and calling me all sorts of names, and I think it's just when certain people do well, I think others get a little bit jealous and they get a little bit of that hate. And I mean, when I was growing up, I mean, Gumby's group, like the Brett Bibees, the Rocket Rons, Russ Slater, Kobe Ellis, like those guys were the top dogs in
Yeah.
Utah.
which makes sense.
Oh yeah, the Steve Guns. You guys used to go at it with Steve Gunn
Oh
all the
yeah,
time.
Steve Gunn was. I remember when I very first got into Derby, watching Steve Gunn down at West Jordan. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like the first time I had to pull in the arena with Steve, I was probably wetting myself because I'm like, dude, I've seen this guy. I mean, I've seen him just take over a heat in the matter of minutes and take out half the field, and I'm not talking like bust their will off. I'm like shove him in the dirt berm, roll him over,
Oh
like
yeah.
crazy.
Well, I remember going to
That was
West Jordan, and the next weekend was the state fair, and I thank God that the state fair was on a Sunday because he didn't derby on Sundays.
Yeah,
yeah,
So we didn't have to
yeah,
go up against him the next weekend. So I
but
was always grateful I didn't have to run against him,
yeah.
just for
Back
that
then,
reason.
a funny.
Steve.
I
Go
want to
ahead.
share a funny story about Steve one time. It was, oh gosh, it's probably been almost 10 years ago when West Jordan kind of went away. It was the old arena before they built this new one, and they went away. And Steve
15
Gunn
years
was getting out of
ago.
Derby.
15 years ago.
Yeah, and Steve Gunn was getting out of Derby. It was about time he was getting out of Derby, and I said, "Aren't you going to miss this?" And Steve says, "No, I don't think I'm going to miss it." And I said, "So, but you're not going to miss West Jordan?" And he says, "No, but I am very thankful for West Jordan because I'm pretty sure that I paid my house off with all my winnings I won at West Jordan."
Yeah, he was always there at the end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, his last show was a show that Semi got hurt when he hit him, and it really affected his psyche.
Yeah,
And it was back then where there was a lot of battle. He was in that era where Chryslers took off really heavily, and there were still a lot of people building under building cars. It was before it's where at now where almost everybody shows up with just nasty built cars. It was in that era where, if you weren't careful, you could hit a car that was just underbuilt and just tear it up in one good shot.
Yeah.
And yeah, he went to that show and pretty well got called names. Somebody got hurt pretty bad. It wasn't his fault. Nothing he did wrong. And that was his last show, and it was at the Weber County Fairgrounds.
that's too bad.
And I always tell him, I see him quite often still, and I'm like, "You ready to get?" I said, "He has not been to one derby since he retired. He has not been to one show." He
Yeah.
said that sort of left a bad taste in his mouth. And, back then, and then the building got out of control, and he was like, "I don't know if I want to be a part of," he says, "I don't like all this heavy overkill." I'm like, Just because it's overkill now doesn't mean it's over. Not, I said, "You were overkill when you were driving, buddy. I mean, I know what you were doing."
Yeah. Well, Nate and
And
I literally had this conversation today. The thing here in Utah is we've got the guys that just want to crash cars. I hear people all the time, "Oh, I've always wanted a Derby. Derbying looks so much fun." That I really feel like the 80s wire class is a great fit for those kind of people.
Yeah,
The young kids
yeah,
getting into it, the people that, want to just go crash a car. And now we've got the old iron wire, which I feel like is a great class for the guys that
want to step
want
up.
to step up a little bit, that want a little more horsepower, that want, a good rear end.
or you're old like me, and if I ever get back in the car, that's the only place I will go.
Yeah. And I
And
like that class. I do.
and look at this.
Whoa, baby. That it's time.
Yep.
It is
It's time.
it is time, and I would have had one of those in Heber last year if my knees wouldn't have been so bad.
Next
Well,
So
year.
if you get the point where your body just can't handle it, I'll come get the car, I'll build it, I'll paint it green, and I'll run it in your honor.
yeah, well, you've got the green down.
I do.
I was right out of the hole. They're like, Brad's stealing your color. I'm like, yeah, it's a good color. I'll let him have some of it.
Well, here's the funny thing. So I used to work for Lynn Mason, and he had a friend. Ironically, his name was Steve Young, and he worked
Oh,
for
yeah.
a paint company. And he would bring in all this paint that was like expired or whatever, and drop it off for Lynn for derby cars because Lynn was kind of like the all to go guy in Heber for demolition derby.
Yeah.
And I was 15 years old. It was my very first car. And I'll be honest with you, I flat out just didn't have enough money to even buy paint. I barely got a car.
Oh yeah.
And Lynn's like, oh, let's go see what we got over here. And Lynn used to run lime green.
Oh
And
yes.
so he had this paint on the shelf, and at the time it was called Shamrock Green. And it was discontinued. And he's like, here, this is too dark for me. This is like Gumby green almost. He's like, you should run it. And I'm like, so I painted my car up. I went out to the Duchesne Derby, and they didn't have Mad Dogs back then, or else I feel like I probably would have got it. My first show, I was just going as fast as I could, hitting anybody in sight. And I just remember
Yeah,
after the Derby,
I remember
yeah,
that.
I even hit Nate, but I back then it was fun to hit
Oh,
your
yeah.
friends. But I just remember everyone talking about the green car, the green car, the green car. And so like after that, I was like, I'm gonna paint my car green again. So
It's stuck.
I painted it and it stuck, and it's kind of like what you said, like a trademark now, because green is not my favorite color. I think a lot of people think it is, and
I thought it was.
but it just kind of stuck, and now I feel like I've got to paint the cars green. Like my kids want me to paint their cars like Blippy and all this other shit, but last year at least I put Ninja Turtles on it to try to like
You
cover up
did.
like a cartoon theme, but I feel like I got to have the green in there.
Yep, that's it. Again, in branding and recognition, I always say that the branding actually made me a lot of money, got me notoriety. I mean, the name got me into Kings of Crash. It wasn't my driving; it was the name, and and that and the experience and all the shows I've been doing, and there's things that happen. But yeah, branding is the most important thing. Individuality. We've talked about the paint schemes and painting. Those are the things that are important, and if
Yep.
you want to be recognized for periods of time.
I agree with that.
No, I do, and I feel like it's helped me win some Mad Dogs because when you do go into those heats and you got 10 black cars out there, it's hard for people to realize who's who. But when there's only one John Deere green car out there, it's pretty easy to catch the eye.
Oh, it is. It's hugely important. Nickname Gumby. I mean, you'd pick up fans over the years, and you always had those built-in fans cheering for you. So it does. There's branding is huge.
For every one fan there cheering for you, you also had one there cheering against you too.
Oh, one. Whew. My favorite, one of my favorite things that ever happened to me is it might have been Heber. It was one of the hills that shows up. I was walking out after the heat, and I looked over the fence, and this kid was calling me over. I'm like, oh, I got to go say hi to somebody that's a fan. I walked over, and I got close. He said, Gumby, you suck. And I'm like,
Thank you.
It's like, whoa, dude. I'm like, I was not expecting that. And I walked over. I'm like, what are you mad at me for? He says, you beat up my daddy. I'm like, oh, I'm like, I'm sorry, dude. I wasn't trying to ruin your evening.
That's awesome.
But yeah, that was my favorite. Gumby, you suck.
Yeah.
I thought that was hilarious.
Well, I think that we're going to end this one on Gumby Sucks. And definitely later in the year, we got to get you back on because, like, I want to talk more old school derby because, like, throughout the rest of this summer, we're going to be talking pretty much real time, what's going on at these shows week after week. The next show's coming up. But I really get an enjoyment. I think a lot of people listening will get an enjoyment of going back, 20, 30 years. And I mean, we had Scooter on, about 6 weeks ago. And still to this day, like, there's so much more after we got done with Scooter that I want to ask him and get him on again, too, because just so much about Steve Carroll and then Scooter and then the boys, with the modern day driving. But I definitely want to circle back and get you on because I want to get into some of like the good stories with Kobe Ellis and like some more Steve Gunn talk and some of the Rocket Ron and maybe some of the Lynn Mason talk too from the early 2000s.
You want to talk about Colby getting sent to jail and what happened. It's a whole
Yes.
other hour subject. You're talking about Colby Ellis. And
Yep.
oh, boy. I could
I
tell
want
you
to
some
talk
stories
more of
there.
that. So, anyways, thank you for coming on this week. We're definitely going to get you back on. For now, let's tell everyone thanks for watching, and on the count of 3, everyone say Gumby sucks. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Gumby sucks.
Rules. I said rules. Remember that.
Thanks, Gumby, for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Hey, enjoy the greatest sport on earth. Go Utah Derbies.
Thanks, Gumby.
Thanks, Gumby.
See you guys.
See ya.
Bye bye.